Hey guys, I hope you're all doing really well. I'm Allure Cosplay and today we break down my Lathiel deck. Let's go!
Let's start with the commander. Lathiel the Bounteous Dawn. It costs 4 to cast. It's a legendary creature unicorn. It has lifelink. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain life this turn, distribute up to that many 1/1 counters among any number of other target creatures. Notice that it says the beginning of each end step. That means we're going to try and gain life on everyone's turn. There are 34 lands in this deck. This deck has 4 artifacts only. There's only 1 mana rock, which is Soul Ring. Next artifact, Well of the Lost Dreams. It costs 4 to cast. Whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained. If you do, draw X cards. Aetherflux Reservoir. That's a pretty big staple for any life gain deck. It costs 4 to cast. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you've cast this turn. Pay 50 life, and Aetherflux deals 50 damage to target creature or player. And one of my favorite, Monster Manual, costs 4 to cast. I really don't cast this part very often, so we're just going to look at this part. We tap 2 and Monster Manual. Put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. And now let's go over the instance. I have a Fog, cost 1 to cast, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Obscuring Haze, cost 3 to cast. If you control a commander, you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. Prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. Eldamari's Call, costs 2 to cast. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Eerie Interference, costs 3 to cast. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and creatures you control this turn by creatures. Heroes Reunion, costs 2 to cast. Target player gains 7 life. I would target me, of course. Congregate, target player gains 2 life for each creature on the battlefield. I love pulling this out whenever someone's playing a token deck. Historic Intervention, costs 2 to cast. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn. Beast Within, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 beast creature token. I love, by the way, that it says permanent and not creature or enchantments, because I can choose whatever permanent I want. I love that. And now let's go over the sorceries. Many Partings cost 1 to cast. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Create a food token. Cultivate, costs 3 to cast. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle. Rampant Growth, costs 2 to cast. Search your library for a basic land card, put that card into the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Bond of Discipline, costs 5 to cast. Tap all creatures your opponents control. Creatures you control gain lifelink until the end of turn. Shamanic Revelation, costs 5 to cast. Draw a card for each creature you control. You gain 4 life for each creature you control with a power of 4 or greater. Storm Herd, this is one of my favorite sorceries of all time. It costs 10 to cast. However, create an X11 White Pegasus creature token with flying, where X is your life total. In a life gain deck, that could be whew. Stream of Life, costs X plus 1 green. Target player gains X life. And of course, in white, Austere Command, costs 6 to cast. Choose 2. Destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. And now let's go over the enchantments. Elven Chorus costs 4 to cast. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. Creatures you control can tap for 1 mana of any color. Asceticism costs 5 to cast. Creatures you control have hexproof, and for 2 you can regenerate target creature. For some card draw, we have Colossal Majesty. It costs 3 to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with a power of 4 or greater, draw a card. In this deck, we put 1/1s on all kinds of creatures due to our commander, so we should easily have a creature with a power of 4 or greater. High Ground costs 1 to cast. Each creature you control can block an additional creature. Giving my creatures menace is pretty useful, I'm not gonna lie. Ashes of the Abhorrent cost 2 to cast. Players can't cast spells from graveyards or activate abilities of cards in graveyards. Whenever a creature dies, you gain 1 life. This doesn't seem like that good of a card, but I've actually shut down a CDH deck against me with that card. Boon Reflection costs 5 to cast. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. Hardened Scales costs 1 to cast. If one or more 1/1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, that many plus 1/1 counters are placed on it instead. Test of Endurance. This is an awesome win con. I have won with it only one time. It costs 4 to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 50 or more life, you win the game. Unflinching Courage costs 3 to cast. Enchant a creature. Enchant a creature gets +2/+2 and has trample and lifelink. Angelic Accord. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain 4 or more life this turn, you put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield. A staple for any white-green deck, Mirari's Wake. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. Noble Purpose costs 5 to cast. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage, you gain that much life. Basically, it gives all my creatures lifelink. Armadillo Cloak costs 3 to cast. Enchant a creature. Enchant a creature gets +2/+2 and has trample. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage, you gain that much life. Angelic Chorus, one of my favorite enchantments. This used to be in my angel deck. It costs 5 to cast. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. Ajani's Welcome costs 1 to cast. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. And now let's go over the creatures. I really like the next 3 creatures because they gain me life in the middle of everyone else's turn. Soul Warden costs 1 to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Any creature or any battlefield, including tokens. Soul's Attendant, same thing, costs 1 to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you may gain 1 life. One more. Essence Warden costs 1 to cast. Whenever another creature comes into play, you gain 1 life. Kami of the Whispered Hopes costs 3 to cast. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on a permanent you control, that many +1/1 counters are put on that permanent instead. You can tap it and add X mana of any one color where X is Kami's Whispered Hopes power. Now, I often just jack up Kami with my Lathiel. I put as many 1/1 counters as I possibly can because then I can tap that 4 mana and I can cast some big spells. I'm gonna butcher that. Giant Adepthaj. It costs 7 to cast. It has trample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of this card. Nylea's Forerunner costs 4 to cast. It has trample, and other creatures you control have trample. Now, a big part of this deck is also giving all my other creatures trample, because what's the use of having all these 1/1 counters and making big creatures if I cannot trample over all my enemies? For some more card draw, Esper Sentinel costs 1 to cast. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. Now, I do like to put 1/1 counters on him because people can pay 1, but people can't pay 5 every time. After a while, people realize that my commander does a lot of the heavy lifting, even though he has 0 1/1 counters on him and has no trample. That's why I put Giver of Runes in here. It costs 1 to cast. You can tap it, and another target creature you control gains protection from colorless or from the color of your choice until the end of turn. I could also use it to protect my Tramplers or anything else that gets targeted. Accomplished Alchemist costs 4 to cast. You can tap it for 1 mana of any color, or you can add X mana of any one color where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Valkyrie Harbinger costs 6 to cast. It has flying and lifelink at the beginning of each end step. Love that. If you gain 4 more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. Beast Whisperer costs 4 to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Definitely need some card draw in this deck. Of course, Vornklex, Voice of Hunger, costs 8 to cast. However, whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. Whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Heliod Sun-Crowned, costs 3 to cast. It has Indestructible. As long as your devotion to white is less than 5, it isn't a creature. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on any target creature or enchantment you control. You can tap 2, another target creature gains lifelink until the end of turn. Tyrannix Rex costs 7 to cast. This spell can't be countered. It has Trample, Toxic 4, Ward 4, and Haste. This used to be in my Angel deck and I absolutely love it. Shattered Angel costs 5 to cast. It has Flying. Whenever land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may gain 3 life. Nyx Fleece Ramp is a sheep. It costs 2 to cast, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 1 life. Thunderfoot Baloth costs 6 to cast. It has Trample. And Lieutenant. As long as you control your commander, this card gets +2/+2, and other creatures you control get +2/+2 and have Trample. A staple win con for any life gain deck. Feldar. It costs 6 to cast. It has Vigilance and Lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. Serra Avatar costs 7 to cast. Serra Avatar's power and toughness are equal to your life total. When it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. Scavenging Ooze costs 2 to cast. You can tap 1, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a 1/1 counter on Scavenging Ooze and you gain 1 life. Rock's Faith Mender costs 4 to cast. It's a Rhino Monk with a lifelink. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. Sunscorch costs 5 to cast. It has Flying. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Sunscorch and you gain 1 life. Another great way to give my creatures Trample, Goreclaw costs 4 to cast. Creature spells you cast with a power of 4 or greater cost 2 less to cast. That's amazing. Whenever Goreclaw attacks, each creature you control with a power of 4 or greater gets +1/+1 and gains Trample until the end of turn. Conclave Mentor costs 2 to cast. If 1 or more 1/1 counters will be put on a creature you control, that many +1/1 counters will be put on that creature instead. When this creature dies, you gain life equal to its power, so it's still worth it to jack them up with all kinds of 1/1s. A new addition to my deck, and I'm about to butcher the name. Ojer Kaslem? Deepest Growth? I don't know, I think that's what it is. It costs 5 to cast. It's a legendary creature god. It has Trample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You may put a creature card and or a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in any order. When it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transform under its owner's control. It transforms into a land. Angelic Skirmisher costs 6 to cast. It has Flying. At the beginning of each combat, choose First Strike, Vigilance, or Lifelink. Creatures you control gain that ability until the end of turn. Brawn costs 4 to cast. It has Trample. As long as Brawn is in your graveyard and you control a forest, creatures you control have Trample. Titanothrex costs 9 to cast. It has Trample, and you can cycle it for 2. When you cycle Titanothrex, put Trample counter on target creature you control. Jagata Primal Hunger costs 12 to cast. It costs X less to cast, where X is the total power of creatures you control, and it has Trample. I have indeed cast this for only 2 green. Another one I'm gonna butcher. Kutsil? A Malamed Exemplar costs 3 to cast. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control, each with a power greater than the basic power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Of course, we needed an Elvish Piper, which costs 4 to cast. You can tap 1 green and tap Elvish Piper and put a creature card from your hand onto play, including those really big expensive tramplers. Verdant Sun's Avatar costs 7 to cast. Whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. Here's how this deck works. Let's say I have these 4 creatures onto the battlefield under my control and I have just passed my turn. The next player casts 2 creatures and has 2 creature tokens that enter the battlefield under their control. Soul Warden would trigger and I would gain 4 life. Then at the beginning of their end step, Lathiel will trigger and I'll administer 4 1/1 counters onto my other creatures. It cannot be on Lathiel, but Kami will also trigger, which will double my 1/1 counters, so now I will have 8 1/1 counters to put onto my creatures. Now I am faced with 2 choices. I can either spread all the counters amongst all my other creatures aside from Lathiel, because he will not put those counters on himself, or I can put all the counters on the one trampler I have. Now, the benefits of putting it all on the one trampler is that it's only been one opponent's turn. Imagine after 2 more opponents' turns plus my own turn, I can really buff this guy up and possibly swing for lethal depending on what the players have. I usually do the opposite. I actually spread it around amongst my other creatures because I have plenty of ways to give all of them trample. I'd rather have a huge army rather than just one big trampler who usually gets removed because he is the biggest threat on the board. Plus, the more 1/1 counters I put on Kami, the more mana I get when I tap him.
Well, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more random nerdy content from me. Don't forget to click the notification button so you know when I upload next. Bye!